Mass Effect Legendary Edition has finally arrived with the impact of a Reaper invasion, and it delivers everything I could hope for from a remastered package of this epic trilogy. This edition is massively effective, but let's explore some of the detailed nuances of why this re-release works so well. 10 to 15 years ago, Mass Effect quickly became one of my favorite franchises. I was obsessed with this trilogy. I played through it multiple times on different consoles to explore the different decision paths, played almost all of the DLC, and immersed myself in the universe and lore. I'm happy to report that this package includes almost all of that superb DLC, and the core game content remains basically unchanged, and that's for the better. The timing of this release is also great, since just enough time has passed for these games to feel nostalgic, especially the first game. Now, Mass Effect 1 has received by far the largest overhaul of these three games. As the first game in the trilogy, BioWare initially had to build the technology and create an extremely ambitious game itself at the same time, and that shows. Mass Effect 1 is a great game in terms of story and RPG elements, but notoriously suffered from some clunky mechanics, long load times, and a lot of unpolished edges. Mass Effect also arrived as an early Xbox 360 title during that awkward transition to HD gaming and more realistic worlds, so there are certainly growing pains evident. By now, you may have seen other videos that cover all the differences between the original and remastered version of Mass Effect 1, since that's where the majority of marketing and hype has landed. EA wanted to make sure that Mass Effect 1 was enjoyable enough to new players to get them engaged in the full trilogy. So rather than detailing an exhaustive list of changes, I wanted to point out several points of interest for long-term Mass Effect fans. First, despite all the hype, Mass Effect 1 is still very clunky. This really isn't a complaint for me personally, since it maintains sort of a nostalgic feel and is definitely still more playable than it was. However, running animations are still a bit awkward, and the shooting mechanics are improved, but still not great. Enemies don't provide a lot of hit feedback, and often spawn in odd locations or are hard to crowd control due to awkward movement patterns and AI issues. Now, the gunplay is slow-paced enough that this is rarely a serious issue, but newcomers to the franchise will definitely feel the awkwardness compared to other games released in 2021. Really, my main issue though with the overhaul of the first game is that EA did not take the time to implement the cover system of the later two games. I'm guessing this would have been a huge effort beyond a remaster, but it is a bit disappointing. The automatic cover system of the first game is very slow to respond and is just really awkward to work with. There are also very limited options for quickly rolling or ducking in and out of cover. There's no easy way to leap over small barriers and get around quickly. All of these issues are addressed very well in the sequels, and that holds up to this day, but it's by far the area I wish they would have spent more time on. EA did update certain mechanics like allowing you to use a broader range of weapons, the aiming system, partner commands, and so on, but I really wish they had focused on some of the actual movement mechanics a bit more. I also want to mention that the graphics really are greatly improved. The second two games in the trilogy look much cleaner and more polished, with up-res textures and higher frame rates, especially on PS5 and Series X. However, the first game has received a more significant overhaul to look closer to the later two games, as you've probably heard by now, and in my opinion, it works really well. Even if the game still doesn't really feel like the second two games, it does look much closer. Environments are noticeably brighter, and the notorious muddy look of the textures of the first game have been mostly cleaned up. Faces and character models are also more defined and clean overall. One area I wish they had spent a little more time on though is the eyes. Although the eyes look better, the first game still has a big problem with very awkward or sort of spooky eye movements, where characters' eyes move much further up or down into their head than they should. This can give some characters a very intense and unnerving stare even in lighter moments. One other huge improvement I want to mention are the load times. On PS5 the load times are not exactly next-gen feeling, but they are significantly faster than the original games and really streamline the elevator sequences and load screens. And there are a lot of elevators in the first game. I mean, there's just elevators everywhere. You go around the corner, there's an elevator. You walk over here, there's an elevator. It's out of control. But anyways, in the original game, I would sometimes actually avoid areas or side quests that I knew involved a lot of loading and elevators, since that could just add up very quickly and become very annoying. Anyway, the brighter visuals and cleaner look of the first game really helped to better immerse you in that compelling story. Although Mass Effect 2 is personally my favorite game in the series overall, I do think that Mass Effect 1 actually has the more compelling narrative and sense of RPG discovery. Unearthing the mystery of the Protheans and the Reapers is as fascinating as it ever was. Now, I cannot make this video without at least mentioning the Mako. Yes, it has received a gameplay overall to be less bouncy, more responsive, and more agile. In my opinion, the Mako now controls mostly fine, but the overhaul does not feel as big as I was expecting. The Mako is still fairly bouncy and a bit slow, but I do think the improvements they made are appropriate relative to the environments that the Mako lives and drives around in. You can tell that the original game was designed for a more slow-paced, sort of meandering gameplay experience for the Mako, where tons of precision is not required, and I think they did a good job of updating it while staying true to that original setup and feel. One area where I think these games do show their age pretty badly is in the facial animation. Mass Effect originally used an automated lip syncing and facial animation system relative to the dialogue, and that shows. Animations generally do an okay job of capturing kind of the general sentiment, and important sequences are animated a little more carefully. However, lip syncing in general is just not that great, and characters never seem to open their mouths fully when speaking, which is one of my personal pet peeves in gaming in general. This gives everyone sort of a murmuring or muttering look. This lip syncing system is noticeably better in the second two games, but it's never really perfect. Now, as for the overall package itself, I think this is a high quality release. EA took the time to give a thematic menu to select which of the three games you want to play, unlike certain remasters that just give you an awkward static screen to choose from and then boot up into an emulator. I'm looking at you, Nintendo. Anyways, the package is also priced appropriately at $50, and that's a fair price considering there are 3 games here with well over 100 hours of content if you really dig into it. Now, I do wish EA had released a native PS5 and Series X version, given that we are about 7 months into the next-gen console cycle already. I thought this omission was kind of odd, and I'm not sure why there aren't even announced plans for this as far as I know. The PS5 store is already really confusing between different versions of the same games between PS4 and PS5, and I could see this causing further confusion. I'm not talking about releasing an optimized version with further graphical enhancements for PS5, I just mean that I should be able to go to the store and buy an actual PS5 release of this game, rather than being forced to play in backwards compatibility mode on PS4. This is even stranger when you consider that playing the game on the PS5 and Series X does unlock increased frame rate and resolution options. So we have a PS4 version of the game that runs on PS5 and has a few PS5 enhancements, but it's not an actual PS5 release, even though it was just released this month, which is all just kind of odd in my opinion. Anyway, I just want to wrap up by assuring you that this is a quality release that has been treated with care. It feels like EA tried really hard to get this right after the disastrous launch of Andromeda, which I won't talk about here, except to say that that game was really bad and I hated it, and I hope the upcoming Mass Effect restores the trilogy to the same greatness that you can experience in this package. So anyways, it really is exciting to see Commander Shepard brought into the modern era with a cleaner, high-resolution look that captures the feel of the original with a more modern presentation. This remaster goes almost as far as possible without getting into remake territory, and I think that was the right call. The highest compliment I can give this package is that playing it today perfectly captures how I remember this game back in the early 2000s when the scope and vision of this trilogy first captured my imagination. This update has cleaned up all of the jarring messiness that nostalgia helps us forget so we can enjoy it with the same energy that we did so many years ago. Thanks for watching and be sure to hit subscribe. I should go.